Hello and welcome. Release Candidate 3 of Eden is out, this time bringing many improvements, with a list of fixes that already goes beyond 50 games. These fixes are already available, so today we are going to talk about this new version, show the list of fixed games, revisit some titles that previously had issues, compare this version against Citron once again, and much more in today's video. Starting with the changelog, I'll summarize only the main improvements, since the technical details often don't make much sense for the end user. The goal of this RC3 is to test and fix important bugs. All users are encouraged to try this version and provide feedback or error reports. However, if you're looking for a more stable experience, the best option is to wait for the next official release. According to the developers, this build was considered safe and will undergo at least 1 week of testing. If approved, it will be promoted to version 0.0.3. Otherwise, new development versions will continue to be released until one is stable enough. They also apologized for the delay of this RC, explaining that during development several critical regressions appeared, along with old issues that still persisted. This ended up requiring a large part of the build to be rewritten. The expectation is that this will be the last release candidate, and that, finally, it will be promoted to version 0.3, bringing all these improvements to the community. Now, let's move on to the main fixes in this version. Critical fixes for LAN connection issues, regression fixes inherited from Yuzu 0.0.2 and RC1. Major improvements to Vulkan and how memory is emulated. Large-scale improvements to the build and CI system. And finally, we now have a working auto-updater. Speaking of the newly implemented features, better compatibility with Solaris and FreeBSD. A new feature called Sync Memory Operations, which fixed several games, but it's worth noting that it should only be enabled when necessary, as it may reduce performance in some titles. The full ISPERT unstub feature, responsible for fixing games like Mario Luigi Brothership and many others. Adjustments to the unsafe and safe memory processing logic, bringing even more stability to other titles. On Android, the beta of AMD integration was added, suggesting the best settings for each game according to your device. The Android version of Eden also received a redesigned interface. There was a large reduction in Vulkan validation errors. Critical Vulkan memory leaks were fixed, resolving issues in games like Dragon Ball FighterZ, Dragon's Dogma, Persona 5, Mario Strikers, and Yoshi's Crafted World. The normalized single-layer TICs adjustment, which fixed titles like God Eater 3. In addition, there were several other internal fixes, but let's leave those technical details aside for now. And before we dive into the part about the games that received improvements, don't forget to leave a like to support the creation of this kind of content, and if this is your first time here, consider subscribing to the channel to keep up with all the news. If you want to buy original games while saving a lot, check out Instant Gaming, the digital store that sells games for various platforms, such as PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo Switch. Get games of all genres with discounts of up to 95%. You'll also find a variety of gift cards and credits for other services. You can pay for your order through your credit card on a website with a 4.7 rating on Trustpilot. You're buying games directly from Instant Gaming, not from other retailers. If you encounter any issues, Instant Gaming offers 24/7 support. And this month, Instant Gaming is offering a special discount on Wuchang, with a price at least $10 cheaper than on Steam, making it the lowest price ever for the game. What are you waiting for to save? Links in the description. Let's now talk about some of the improvements that happened in the transition from RC2 to RC3. And here I want to thank Paolo, Eden's developer, for sending me this list. So, take this part of the video as a compliment to the tests I showed in RC2. If you've already updated your emulator, all these fixes are already available. An important detail is that most of these improvements are focused on the Android version. The main one is that practically no game suffers from the dreaded 0 FPS anymore, where the game simply stopped working. In other words, between RC2 and RC3, many games that used to freeze now run without that problem. Among them, we have the following list, which is showing on screen for you. To take advantage of these improvements, Paolo recommends using Kimchi 2.5.2.0 R5 drivers or lower. On the other hand, Mr. Purple's T21 is not suitable, since it's based on a newer Mesa code that causes issues. You can also use the stock drivers without any problems. From here on, we'll talk only about RC3's exclusive new features. The first one is the end-of-force game crashes. The titles I'll mention now were fixed thanks to the Sync Memory Operations option, regardless of the CPU accuracy chosen. The full list is on screen right now. From this list, I tested Sonic X Shadow Generations, and at least in my case, the fix isn't 100% yet. Using sync memory operations with the CPU set to auto, the game had some visual issues, like lighting glitches and color problems on screen objects. This had already been fixed before, even in Eden itself. So, to avoid this kind of bug and random crashes, just set the CPU to accurate, and the game runs fine. In this same session, I also tested Sonic Frontiers. Even though it's not on the official list, it's a title that usually causes a lot of issues in most emulators. In OpenGL, it runs, but with heavy stutters, and in Vulkan, it almost never launches. In RC3, I managed to play it in Vulkan with far fewer problems. But unfortunately, random crashes still happen. I've already reported this to the development team, and they're looking into it. I didn't test the other games on this list. Now, talking about titles that didn't boot or crashed further along, there were also major improvements. The list is on screen. And on top of that, we had fixes for games that had problems when installing updates or DLCs. Among them are: from this list, I tested Cassette Beasts, a creature collecting game in the Pokemon style. With Update 1.5 installed, it only showed some minor visual issues, nothing that affects gameplay. In other words, the fixes applied really did solve the main problems. Another important detail, on the project's GitHub, especially for the Android version, you'll notice there are now 3 different builds. The standard, recommended for most devices, the optimized, for devices that support frame generation natively, like the Red Magic, and the Legacy, aimed at devices with Adreno 600 series GPUs. Finally, we have a small comparison between Eden RC3 and Citron, using exactly the same graphic settings and in the same test scenario. We chose Kakariko Village as the reference point and did a full run, crossing the entire village until reaching its exit towards Kakariko Bridge. The result was as follows: Citron reached an average of 79 FPS, while Eden RC3 came out ahead with 83 FPS. An important detail I noticed compared to the last test, which you can check out in the card above, is that shader compilation and frame time in Eden no longer showed those strange and inconsistent readings that appeared previously. So, at least in this game and under these test conditions, Eden RC3 managed to perform better than Citron. And that's it, guys. These were the main improvements between RC2 and RC3 of Eden. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.